30 seconds, I'm going to walk through how to solve this. So like a 30-second warning.
Multiple projects open and you have a lot of things created. But then I think my question is supposed to be getting at if that didn't show up, because you like cleared your entire environment or something, how would you get it back? And so then you would just load those things that you say. Yeah, that at least that's how I answer that question.
It's just like you want to make sure,
I would actually say that you said that already has file, and that was like you were reading.
Exactly. And I'm going to highlight a couple of resources.
Yeah, the archive name for .edu.
Yeah.
I think that's what
We don't have Consulting Monday just because of the holiday.
Okay, that's good to know. But other than that,
which you have already in the workspace.
all right. If I can interrupt you, there's sort of never a perfect time to do this, but I want to walk you through how I would solve this, and hopefully this can hook into. I think most people got most of it. The first step was to load Tidyverse. And the reason is this read underscore CSV function that I want to use is from the Tidyverse. So if I don't tell it that I'm going to use this function, it doesn't know where it exists. Now, the way I've structured my files down here is I've put, and this is common, you'll come up with your own preferences. I've put the hamsters data in this folder data-raw so that not everything has to live in the same folder. And when it's in a subfolder, I need to do something slightly different. I need to first tell it the name of the folder, and then slash, and then the name of the file that it's going to get. Sort of working with folders. I'm also Camtasiaing this. I'll send out a screencast of this afterwards if that's better than taking notes. Can you guys see it? Is it better if I zoom in? Sort of a trade-off there. And so now we have hamsters. And I said, what's our first thing to do? Create hamsters many. So I'm going to create an object called hamsters many. I'll use the formal R assignment, but you could have used an equal sign just as well. And then I want to just take a certain type of person. So this is a filter command. The first thing I give to filter is the data set that I'm going to filter. And then I need to give it a condition. So if I looked inside of, I need to run that. So if I look inside of hamsters, now I want people who have at least 5 hamsters. Something about this code is a little confusing, and maybe I've chosen poor names, because now you need to realize that this hamsters refers to my data frame, right? Whereas this hamsters refers to the column within the data frame. R's smart enough to know that because it knows what to look for. But when we're reading our own code, we're oftentimes not smart enough to know that. So it might be valuable to name this, I could have named this like hamsters df, and then that would have been a little bit clearer. A reminder from last time, I've written it like that. Oftentimes people will write, oh, that's not that one. We'll write something very similar using this pipe command, which tells me I'm going to take hamsters and then filter hamsters greater than equal to 5. These two things are totally synonymous. Does that make sense so far-ish? And then I'm also going to do the same thing. Hamsters, many cages equals, and filter. Also, one nice thing is if once it does a tab complete, so I can choose that, and then hamster cages. And what did we say? This is greater than equal to what? 3? So now I sort of have two things. I have 2 data frames. Hamsters many is the 3 people with at least 5 hamsters. Hamsters many cages is the 3 people with at least 3 hamsters cages. And then I had you do this bind rows thing. And did you guys figure out what bind rows did? How did you guys describe it when you saw the result of bind rows? Just anyone?
Bind the rows of the 2 tables.
Like it stacked them, right? So there's sort of 2 types of combining I can do with data frames. I can put them side by side. Like this is like a join or a call bind, and this is a row bind or a bind rows. The rows, I'm stacking the rows on top of each other, and binding is sort of the act of putting them together. And so, of course, this had 3 rows. This had 3 rows. If I bind 2 data frames, each with 3 rows, this should have 6 rows, and it does, which is nice. So we answered 5, which is good. 6, let's write this like this. And so if I do just many, and then I say arrange and give it this hamsters, it's taking this data frame. Arrange says like sort, like determine the order of the rows. And then I've given it the column that I want to sort by. And notice by default, it's sorting in a ascending fashion. The lowest values are at the top and the highest values at the bottom. If I want to sort the opposite way, I can wrap it in DESC, which is going to tell it to do descending sort. And now I've just flipped the order of all of my rows. Why I gave it in the activity, I gave you 2 columns. One was mistyped, but we'll type it correctly. What the second column does is says, if there's a tie when I sort with the first column, what should I do? And so now you see before, well, this is the same person, so this is sort of a non-illustrative example. But if it was a tie and if these 2 numbers were different, it would have dictated the order based on the second number. And then the last thing these 2 commands get to is this idea of like saving and what do I do if I want to leave and come back. And sort of the way I explained it is you can think of your workspace as having a bunch of different objects. Just each of them is a circle. Now one of these is hamsters, one of these is hamsters many, one of these is many, each of those things. What the save.image does is it saves the entire workspace. And so this will generate an R data file. And so it's saving your entire workspace, every single object. We talked about last time a lot of sort of people that consider themselves good sort of frown upon this because they think you just want to focus on which objects you want. You don't want to just willy-nilly save everything that happens to be there. But it can be a useful process. Whereas the write RDS, you have to give it first, what object do you want to save? So it's saving one single object. And then what do you want to name that file? And since I'm writing an RDS file, I have to save it as a .rds. And so write RDS says, take this thing and save it. And so it's the difference between saving all of the files in my workspace versus saving just one of them. RDS is an R-specific file format. So if you're not using R, it's going to be, like you can't open this with Microsoft Excel or something. Similarly, we have other commands, write_CSV will write your output as a CSV file. So someone with my phone probably. And you can write underscore different things. If you just typed write underscore, maybe try this right now. Type write underscore. I think it'll come up with all of the possible. Is that experience you're having? And so what's nice about that is, let's say you knew you wanted to write your file, but you weren't exactly sure what format you wanted to write it in. Like oftentimes, these are named with similar prefixes for that exact reason. It becomes convenient to type write underscore, see all of my options. Inversely, if this was CSV underscore write, I don't sort of get that, because if I write CSV underscore, there's only one function like that. Any questions? Yeah.
I was a little behind you there. So we were trying to write RDS that many.
Yep.
and we got an error,
Cool.
and it says, cannot open file, data clean, many RDS, no such file or directory. Right?
When you did write RDS?
Yeah. So you said in your instructions you got an error. How do you fix it? So.
Oh, I see. Did I not? I didn't. So what this is trying to do, let's actually do this example. And then it's data clean / many.rds. So what this is telling me is save the many object, which is this data frame.
Yep.
And then this is telling me to save it as the file many.rds.
Right.
And it's telling me to save it in this data-clean folder.
Right.
Now, R is running into a problem in this case because I don't have a data-clean folder. So if I were to use this and create data-clean, now I have a folder. And now running this command should work because now it has a home to put it in.
It can't automatically create that folder for you.
Oddly, it doesn't. And this is, it could, but they've written the function not to because write RDS has one purpose, and it's to write an RDS.
Right.
And so having side effects to functions can have negative consequences. If write RDS generates folders, it's sort of
It can be dangerous.
it can be a dangerous behavior, though in this case, it would make us slightly happier, right?
Right.
And so this also, I've chosen this because this models what I think is a good workflow. I take data from the internet, I put it in data raw. That's data I'm not going to touch. Like that is literally what I got. I open R, I read in from data raw, I do some stuff. In this case, it was trivial stuff. Then I write my output to data-clean. And so now I have this nice thing where I know in data-clean is things I've created. And I know in data/raw is things I've gotten from someone else. Other questions? Yeah.
Is there code for saving a project file?
For saving a project file. No, you just like save it in R usually. So, and this, like the project file just sort of opens you into this world. There's nothing really being updated about the project file. You save the code that exists within the project file, but you're not actually affecting the project file when you do that. Yeah.
When you are saving files like this, I know in Stata you have to tell it to replace a file that already exists. Does this give you any kind of warning? Does it not allow you to save files with the same name?
Let's demonstrate that. So let's say and now many, instead of being that data frame, is just the number 1. Now let's try to save many again, and it just rewrites automatically.
Okay.
So now many contains
The old many is gone.
Yeah, the old many is totally gone. I've got no warning that that's happened. Yeah. Other questions before we keep going? Yeah.
Well, just the old many is gone from your environment, but it's still in data clean.
In data clean, I just wrote over it because I ran write RDS again with the new many. So my only way to get the old many back is to rerun the code, which conveniently I have above. But yeah, I kind of made a mistake there. But yeah.
So I think you already said this, but do you recommend just like opening a project by clicking on the project file, or do you like set a working directory like you would in Stata?
By clicking on the project file, you basically open R and set your working directory to that folder.
Right.
And it has also other nice benefits. It'll show you the files in here. So I recommend using the projects just because I find that to be a convenient workflow.
Mm-hmm.
You could equivalently just open R every time, set your working directory like you do in Stata.
Mm-hmm.
I find it really convenient on the Mac because then I can do this to open, like I have a ton of different R projects, and every time I want to start something, I literally just type the name of the project in, and I can get going immediately. I find setting my working directory at the beginning sort of a slightly tedious process. Other questions? Anything else? Cool. We have 34 minutes left together. Yeah,
Actually, I do have a question.
please.
So I tried to do the mutate,
Uh-huh.
and it said that there's no documentation for mutate in
There's no documentation for mutate?
Yeah.
That's something.
We have different versions.
Oh, maybe I closed it, opened it, and it didn't save my Tidyverse. Maybe that's
Let me model just because, well, we'll use it eventually, but just because I had you do this. What mutate does is it generates a new column. So think of like I'm mutating the data frame and making it. So if I do mutate, what I need to give it is first the name of the new column. Then I need to tell it how to create that new column. I can just create a trivial new column where the value is always 2. More than likely, I'm going to want to do something to do with my existing data. So let's say new is just...
language is the generate, I guess.
Yeah, this is the generate, exactly. Let's say everyone found a new hamster and I need to update my data frame. Well, now everyone has an additional hamster. Maybe
That's
I'm...
the way hamsters work.
Everyone, it was a rainy day and everyone found a new hamster. Maybe I'm interested in hamsters per hamster's cages. That seems like a relevant variable in the context of this data frame. Like this is a measure of quality of life for these hamsters. And I can get that by dividing those two things.
Could we do an if statement here?
Not really. If you want to, I'm not going to go over this, but if you want to do conditional logic, it's case_when. You can give it under different conditions, different things will happen. Oftentimes, you can get away with just using this sort of full column logic. Like if you wanted to know if the person had greater than or equal to 5 hamsters, I can do that. And now I have falses and trues, depending on. So you can usually get away with doing something like that without, I think you would have thought to do an if statement there, but I don't need to. Any other questions? So I'm gonna, for a little bit, pull in, we've been working with this trivial but fun data frame. I'm gonna pull in this crazy CPS data frame that you guys gave me, which I don't know my way around, so we'll demonstrate that activity. So I'm not sure if it might be best for you to just follow along visually and maybe take notes, and then hopefully we'll have time for you guys to type on your own computer. I'm fearful of the pace if you guys are typing and we need to download everything. What I've done is I've pulled in this CPS data into, let me create a new script, and we can go full screen since we no longer need the hamsters. And I will, so in my environment, I have a bunch of random stuff. I'm now no longer going to work with the hamster stuff, so I'm just clearing my environment. I could have also fully restarted R. And so let's load in the Tidyverse. And so, like I said, I have this. Do you guys know what the CPS data is? It's some survey of people. You sent me an email about this.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of people.
They know that current population
Cool.
survey.
The current population survey. It's about people, and it scales up to the United States population. The first thing I need to do is, and I'll model what to do when you don't really know what to do, is I have what's a .dta file. I actually don't usually remember how you load those in. It's a stata file getting read into R. So there's no, I would usually look for, like we did read CSV. So the first thing I would do is try read DTA. It doesn't turn out to be a function. So I'm somewhat sad. So that, like, literally what I will do is how to read in file in R. And this is maybe the biggest life hack I've ever been told in my entire life when it comes to programming is, well, I have something, this read.dta. I don't really know when that's from. I'm going to trust things that came out within the last year or so. And then I also oftentimes just like add Hadley to this because Hadley's that big of a name that he will undoubtedly, like literally here I have now a package that Hadley wrote, which I trust 10 times as much as a package someone else wrote. So I've filtered to things to do with Hadley Wickham, who I like as an R developer, that have been published in the last year, and that usually gets me to a fairly good spot. And so it looks like Hadley has another package called Haven, which has a read underscore DTA. And so let's see, I don't remember if I have this package. Looks like I do. Now read DTA is a function that I'm able to use. So let's give it, should I do new with additional variables or just the new? Does it matter?
The additional variables will make life a little easier.
All right, let's have an easier life. I need to know the name of this thing, and it's a little bit long. So a little thing I do is I'll just go to rename, and then that'll pull up the full. Try to rename it as itself, and didn't like that. So I need to go into data raw. Here's the file I want. If I just run this command, what's going to happen? It'll read it in. What'll be the downside of just running this? Any guesses? It'll read it in. It's a lot of variables. I want the whole data frame. Here's what I want to do. If I just read it in, it'll just print it to the screen, and I won't have it. So that'll be really sad, especially if it takes a long time to read in. It spends all this energy reading in. It just shows it to me, and it's gone. Now I'm reading it in, and I'm going to save it to an object called CPS. And so it worked. It didn't provide any error messages. It tells me down here it's there. There's 133,000 rows and 117 variables, which seems about right.
That's our CPS right there.
I can print it over here. Printing somewhat helps. It shows me the first 7 columns and then lists out all of the other columns. I figured this out, so I'm going to cheat slightly. There's a great function. Okay, yeah, this is the wrong one. So what Haven does is, one huge difference between Stata and R is that Stata always use these labels, right? You have short variable names, but then you have a label attached to it. R, usually you just work with variable names. And so what this Haven command actually did was each column does have or many of the columns actually do have a label attached, which I can see here with this plus LB. I can take a column. So one notation is CPS. If I do a $sign and then the name of the variable, that pulls out just that variable. And then since this has labels, it's also printing for me what 1 means male and 2 means female. And so that's just one nice thing that you could have, if you're wondering what the definitions are, and a good transition from Stata to R. So let's do something with this. One, there's probably some outcome variable we're interested in. The first thing I want to do is I have 117 columns. I probably don't need all of those. And so I'm going to select just a few of them, and then my world will be constrained in a nice way. So I don't know, what do you guys want to select? What's a good outcome variable of this? There's
income variables are good.
Income variables? All right, we'll have some fun with income. So what do you want, inc wage?
Inc wage.
So if I run this command, now I just have inc wage. I probably want other things, so I can comma and continue to add those. So what do we want to explain inc wage with?
Age, gender.
Not squared?
No.
I see that's there.
Yeah.
Gender?
Sex.
Sex. What else? Give me at least one. Well, I guess age is continuous.
Education. Years at YRSED.
You know this data set.
Yeah, YRSED. Yeah.
You really know this data set.
Yeah, well.
So now if I run that, now notice CPS is 117 variables wide and 133,000 rows. I haven't created a new object. I've just printed to the screen only 4 of those variables, and I identified those 4 variables using the select command. So, okay, so we're interested. I think one first thing I would do is there seems to be some messiness here. Like I don't have, what should I do with the people I don't have their wages for? Or,
Well, right? Age less than 16, might want to drop them.
Cool, let's do that. So let's literally walk through. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I don't want people less than or equal to 16. You want 16-year-olds?
Sometimes.
All right. So we'll drop so what's gonna happen here? I've just made a mistake, not on purpose. Is I'm going to get people. I'm only gonna get people
Right.
less than 15.
Right.
I have two options. The exclamation point says not. So it takes the logic and it just flips it. So this says not age less than or equal to 15.
So you run this command to replace to replace CPS with the filtered and selected version, but then you change it and you can operate it again on the full. You haven't replaced CPS with this when you run it once.
Every time I'm running, it's not changing CPS. It's not creating a new object. It's just outputting to the screen the results of that function call.
Because you don't have the attribute command in there.
Because I haven't set assign it.
Right.
Oftentimes you'll see code that looks like this.
Right.
If I do that, then if I keep running this over and over again, it's going to stop doing anything because it's already changed CPS. And because I want to see visually what's happening, I'm just printing to the screen as we scaffold up. So I think this logic's kind of confusing. So let's do, that feels more readable to me. All right, what else should we do to this data set? Does it seem good as it is? Is there anything else we need to do cleaning wise?
Just a small question.
Uh-huh.
Instead of doing the greater than or equal to 16, do you just do greater than 15? Or do you have to have two symbols?
No, greater than 15 would be fine.
Okay.
If someone was 15.2, you'd then get them.
Got it.
Right, but if you assume integers. But are we at a point where we could build a model or
I think so.
do something like that?
Yeah.
One thing I might wonder is, this is oftentimes useful, just out of curiosity, I'll do a count on sex. And so it gives me the distribution of sex, or I can do a count on anything else, and it'll just tabulate that, which I think this is literally tabulate in data. Let's, yeah, of course.
Say I wanted to look at like sex and race here. Would I just do comma after sex and add it there and we'll do the both?
Yeah, do we have a race or sex? Yeah, so there are 1,025. Sex 1 is male 16-year-olds.
How do you get that table to show with the value labels instead of the 1 and the 2?
I would have to do something fancy like replace. I'd have to do a mutate and replace 1 with female and 2 with male or something, whatever the logic is. We could.
Because value label, right? The labels are kind of important to like store the data in the minimal format, but still associate, right?
So you would like for this to, when I do this, instead of saying 1 and 2,
Yeah.
you would like for this to say.
Because otherwise you got to look it up every time.
Yeah, let's do. I think I can do this fast enough to make it worthwhile. So if sex equals 1, I want the value to be, what did we say? Is it male?
I think 1 is male and 2 is female.
But does that mean you'd have to do this for every, like, let's say there's like
100 variables.
yeah, and right now they're all stored numerically, but they're labeled with like the actual word. So you'd have to do this.
So I'm sort of doing this replacement manually. I bet, I don't think we have time or it's worth our time. I bet Hadley's built in that Haven package the ability to take the labels stored in there and replace them in the data. I'm almost positive that exists. I just don't know. I haven't worked enough with data files in R to know. Because yes, we do have this. We're basically saying, I'm going to manually do this replacement, but we're basically saying apply these labels to the values in the column, and that must be possible. Scott?
I'm sure you know. One of the reasons that you probably don't do that, or why it's not something that's built into R, is because you would never compute on
Male and
string
female.
labels like that.
Right.
Because computing on numbers is vastly faster than computing on strings.
Yeah, but you want to be able to pull the labels in into your table.
So like now you like how this looks better. It's much more readable to the human eye, and I agree with that. What you would probably do is count, to Scott's point, to make a happy middle. You would count with the number and then replace.
Yeah.
So you now get the readable output, but you haven't calculated on strings.
Yeah. You don't want to calculate on strings because trailing or leading spaces could screw it all up.
Exactly.
Among other things.
Exactly. So, and I think, just to highlight again, I think this code becomes really readable and makes me really happy. Start with CPS, select these 4 columns, take sex, and when sex is 1, turn it into male. When sex is 2, turn it into female. Take only people for which their age is greater than or equal to 16. And then I think we no longer want to do that. So just because I had, and now let's save this. Let's call this CPS new.
By the way, it looks like RStudio has a built-in function for import dataset.
Does it? Where like r read.dta or something else?
So like in the menus.
What? Where in the menu? What?
Import file. Import dataset
Oh, from
Stata, and then you browse to it.
and then you double click.
Yeah.
That'll work. I would trust Hadley's solution more.
All right. Well.
But I'm sure that will work. I would guess you'll have a slightly worse experience. But I couldn't tell you in exactly which way.
The nice thing is you always want your work to be as reproducible as possible. It's reproducible if you have a line of code in your R file that says exactly what you did, and you can attribute that function to a specific library. So the more that you use things that are in RStudio but not within like libraries and code that you're writing, the less reproducible your work gets, and at a base level.
Right, but I mean, you read it in, you say that, I mean, you don't necessarily, the file direction for where it is stored on your folder is not, you don't need to reproduce that for somebody else.
So the read functions, the same functions that do the same things are not always transparent.
Right.
So if we have the read DTA function, we can go to the Hayden package, we can look at the source code, we can know exactly how it does everything.
Right.
Unless we're looking explicitly at the RStudio source code, we may not know, has it actually changed something, has it done something different? It's a sort of like referential transparency is increased when we use sort of open source software that are standards.
You trust the Hadley over the RStudio.
Or I trust reading Hadley's code. I trust reading the source code of a library more than I trust things that are built into large applications.
It's also worth pointing out that Hadley's employed by RStudio at this point. So,
Yeah.
I'm for what I want to demonstrate now. I'm gonna say.
Oh, what's yours at? There's not an extra key there.
Did I make something mistake? Years.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna create year Z into a binary variable, which is if you have 12 or maybe I'm slightly off here, but should this be 13 maybe? And then once I've constrained my data set and modified it in the way I want to do, I call it CPS new. I could probably come up with a better title for that, but now let's do some plotting. This is sort of my workflows. First, clean my data, then I'll plot it, and then afterwards we'll build a model. And so I'm noticing something went wrong here. So I have this case when this should say no college.
Well, 12, I think we're.
Right, so I mean, another interesting question is like, what's the missing value, right? Is that the...
Yeah, I had less than 12, so I was not assigning 12 to anything, and it was returning missing. Now I think now it makes us happier. So now what I want to do is I want to plot. Hadley's first invention of fame was Ggplot, which is the grammar of graphics. And so we don't have enough time to model completely, but I'll show you some of its functionality and how you plot in R. So I'm taking CPS new. I'm creating a ggplot object. I'm going to say my x variable, what do I want on the x-axis here? I'm thinking I'm interested in the age on the x-axis and then the income on the y-axis. And then I'll look at how that relationship is different for people that have gone to college or not gone to college, and for males and females. So we'll start with, and if I do that, let's see if that, so what's happening here is this column age has a label on it, and it's getting confused about what to do with the Haven label thing. It looks like it still worked, and it plotted 1 point for each of
130.
130,000. I'm running into some.
We run into this from time to time. It's sort of like the old-fashioned dot plot with 133
is a lot.
Can darken your door.
So let's just, for this demonstration, I'm going to take just 1% of people.
AES, the Ggplot.
It says I'm using an aesthetic. So it's aesthetic is how I assign variables to different elements of the plot. I'm going to rerun all of this, but now I just this sample fraction just randomly selected 1%. So now CPS new has 1,000, only 1,000 cases, which is fine for our demonstration. It'll make everything a little bit faster. What I don't like is here, anytime a point happens twice, I just plot on top of it and it's not visible. So one thing I might change is if I change the alpha, that's how dark do I make the point when I plot it. Now when I plot on top of each other, it makes it darker and I get what I think is a better sense. So very often, instead of plotting over itself, I'll mess with this alpha to, yeah, that seems like a little high. That seems somewhat good, maybe slightly lower. I don't know, that seems kind of okay. It gives you a pretty good sense of most people are not making much, and then you have some people that are making a lot. Oftentimes what we will do with income is you'll like scale the y-axis with a log. Is that something you guys have talked about, or some concept that's scale? So if I do scale log y10, it's now transformed it into a log scale. I don't know if we should do that. It looks a little bit confusing. And so what I might want to do now is I don't have sex and years and your college status on this.
Let me just chime in and say that,
Yeah.
that by reputation, R has a broader and more flexible graphing and plotting apparatus than Stata. Stata is somewhat constrained, so there's more flexibility in the R on the plotting and graphing. That's what people have told me. I'm a little bit stuck in the Stata plots, but looking to branch out.
So I think this is pretty cool. Like now with just 4 lines of code, one thing you might wonder is, you might add a smoother. I want to look at the relationship. I might want to say that smoother should be a linear model. You could continue to play around with this in different ways to get something that's a little clearer. But already seeing here, if you look at left versus right, you can see that people on average that go to college have higher wages. If you look at male, female, can you notice much of a difference? The males, you have many more people that make a ton of money. Right, for females, I only have, one person making $250,000. For males, I have maybe 10 times that or something. Any thoughts or questions here? Yeah.
So all those like plus and then another line of code, that was like all feeding into one chart, or were you making 4 like different ones?
All
with
feeding
each
into
line?
one chart. So basically you can think of, we build the chart up.
Yeah.
So here I've initialized the chart but put nothing on it.
Yeah.
Here I'm going to add points with this alpha of 0.25. Here I'm going to facet grid, which is make a separate plot for each of these sex by college. And then here I'm going to add a smoother to each of those quadrants.
Do you have a setting that's like creating your axis labels? Because mine's showing like 3e to the 5.
Oh, you're getting like scientific notation or something.
Is that a setting that I just need to find?
Yeah, there are settings for that. So it's like if you do like scale X, it has something to do with the scale. We can talk more later if you want. I don't know why our defaults would be different. We must be running something.
What are the plus signs?
It says like add something new to my plot.
How is it different from the other thing?
So the pipe says take what you just had and feed it into the next function. These are conceptually similar ideas. The plus says take this graph and add another layer on top of it or add something to it. But it's not as if the pipe would take this and feed it into the next function, which isn't exactly what's happening here. I think Hadley wishes the plus could be the pipe, but there's some technology underneath that makes that not possible. We have 7 minutes left. I was thinking I can show you making a model on this and just quick modeling in R. Does that seem like a reasonable use of our last
Sounds great.
7 minutes? So we graphed one thing that graph told us is things don't look crazy. I don't see absurd values, so maybe I'm happy to move on to make some sort of model.
So
The modeling command in R is lm. And then what I provide it is I provide it a formula. And so the first thing I provide it is the dependent variable, which in this case is ink wage. And then that tilde says, is the formula syntax, says, okay, now I'm going to provide you with my independent variables. And so what do we want here? We can just do age to start with. If I run this, what's going to go wrong?
tell it what data set to use.
I haven't told it what data set to model from. I've given it column names. So now I'll do data equals CPS new. It's estimated a linear model and just printed it to the screen. I likely want to save that model somewhere as opposed to generate it and print it. So I call MOD will be my model.
And let me break in here and say that the linear model syntax and the GM general linear model
Yeah,
syntax,
GLM.
GLM, is it GM or GLM?
GLM.
GLM. Syntax for both of the, I have some pages in the big class Excel file from 381 where there's the regression table and the logistic regression table. I have new windows there for R syntax for those models, so that you can go there and see what the R syntax and output looks like.
And so now I've created my model, and I'm probably interested in what are the coefficients, are the p-values significant, things like that. You have two options. You have this is sort of becoming a theme. You have the old way of doing things. If I do summary, it will print a bunch of things. This probably looks somewhat like what state output looks like. Things are in different places, but I have what the formula was. I have the point estimate for both the intercept and the slope on age as it predicts, or on age as it predicts wage, standard error, the p-value, some model fit statistics, some overall model statistics. There's a
And worth noting that that mod is down in your environment now, so that's another object in your workspace which is another difference between R and Stata, which is that you create the model, and the model and its matrices and the data that creates the model, that's a new object. And this is one of the ways that the workspace can grow in memory, which is you run 30 models, the data set is 10 megs. Every time you run it, you're maybe adding 10 megs.
It's a really good, and you can save this model object outside of R, then you can load it back up and look at it again. It's like a living, breathing thing that you can access. So the new way to do this, because I don't know if it was Hadley this time, but somebody said this was just printing all of this stuff. Like, how do I get this value? What do I do? There's this idea of, there's this other package called Broom, which you can, like the thing you clean your kitchen with that will clean your models for you. And within Broom becomes a function called Tidy. And if I feed to Tidy my model, it gives your output in a data frame. And this is exactly the type of data frame that we were working with before.
Mm-hmm.
So all of my, like, let's say I only wanted significant variables. I can operate on this data frame just like I operate on other things. So if I only want significant variables, I would filter to variables for which the p-value is, I don't know what your guys' favorite alpha level is, but we'll say 0.05.
Yeah.
Now I filter the universal favorite, right? Now I filter and the intercept, it just shows the intercept because the p-value for age was 0.13. But you could imagine, what were the other variables we had? We had college and, was it sex? Now tidy mod gives me, now I have estimates for each of the 4. If I do this filtering, I see that 2 additional variables are significant.
So one way you could, I mean, there's a couple things you could do with this data frame output. One is it might make it easier to format the table automatically that you want to make out of this output. And Stata has some functions for that too. The other thing is if you're writing programs that are running 1 million regressions and you're pulling in output, you know, I'm fitting 1 million regressions to a whole bunch of different data sets or, you know, iterations of something, and you want to pull results out of that. This is a way to figure out, you know, to filter the results so that you can sort of categorize the models by how often is this thing significant or so on. So, I mean, it's doable in Stata, but it's probably easier in R.
It's time for our grand finale. I have the model, and I have data that I fit the model using the CPS new data. One thing you might want to know is for each row, for each observation, what would the model predict the income wage to be? And I'm doing this for the data on which the model was fit, but you could also do this for an out-of-sample data set, data on which the model was not fit, so long as it has the variables that the model needs. For this task, there's another package which you'll have to download called ModelR. And I can take my data frame, I can say add, and I can add the predictions. And I'm giving it a model. And so when I do that, now for each row, I've added a column, which is according to this model, what's the predicted income wage.
Right.
And I can also, there's a sister add residuals. And so now you'll notice that what income or the prediction plus the residual should equal the value.
Right.
And so now I'm able to work with my predictions. And
Yep.
One just high level thing is in R, we're trying to stay within this data frame structure as much as possible, because then those commands that you'll get really good at, filter, mutate, select, are always applicable to what you're working with, and you're in a format that you know what to do with. So you'll notice we're always trying to get back to that data frame structure. Cool. We're at risk of going over time. Maybe I'll stop and let Scott plug our resources.
Yeah. You guys have been totally great, and I really appreciate it. This has been a fantastic resource, and I feel like I've learned a lot. So,
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
We're always happy to come in and help out. And we do Monday through Thursdays. We have walk-in consulting 2 to 5 o'clock over in the Belmont Dining Room in Green Library. We at this point have have R coverage every single day, which didn't used to be the case. This coming Monday we're off because of President's Day.
It's a holiday.
But Tuesday to Thursday, we're there, and if you can't make those times, if you go to ssds.stanford.edu, we have a contact form. Let us know that you just can't make it, and we'll set up an appointment.
Yeah.
And we'll try to help you by email.
In this class, next week, we're going to be doing a week of event history stuff in Stata, and then we're going to have 3 weeks of Austin on our after that. So that's our.
So probabilistically, no one's going to take this advice, but if you do, it will change your life. Hadley has written a book called R for Data Science that just the book is incredibly clear.
He's not a relative.
If you obtain, no, I don't know the guy.
Married to your sister or something?
No, I don't. Well, I've met the guy, but I have no sort of allegiance to him. But he's written this book, and if you were to go through this, it walks you through in much greater detail everything we've talked about and then some. If you got mastery over this, I think you would see your data career take off.
So the book's just online.
It's online. It's free. You could also pay and get a hard copy, but 99% of people will just go through this. Then the code is also, you can just find the code and you can copy it into R and run it and see how it goes. It's fun, great fun. And we also have a resource. What's our resource? It's R.
You go to r.stanford.edu. There is a community of people who use R at Stanford. R.stanford.edu is run by Claudia Engel, who runs the R Open Lab on Wednesdays within our sort of consulting area. But she tries to aggregate different packages that people have made at Stanford that are in R. She has a newsletter, and when there's workshops or tutorials or events that deal with R, she posts or sends out the newsletter. And so she tries to sort of convene the community just a little bit, provide some shared resources. If you particularly like video type courses or sort of learning by way of video and then doing exercises, we can also recommend some learning things like that other than the R for Data Science book. Data Camp is a big one.
Data Camp site's pretty good too.
It has a number of free courses on there, but you quickly move into the paid. One thing, so I can tell you the courses there are extremely high level. In terms are extremely high quality, and they go from both very basic things to very, very complex, very specific things in both